some of the most notorious drug cartel leaders are now facing the ultimate payback for their decades-long reign of terror, including the notorious Rafael Caro Quintero, one of the men responsible for the brutal and murder of an American DEA agent. The U.S. has also celebrated the capture of ruthless kingpins like Dairo Antonio Úsuga, José Rodolfo Villarreal-Hernández, and Ismael Zambada. All of these men destroyed countless lives and will now pay the most dreaded price: life in prison, or possibly even worse. Law enforcement agencies have ramped up their efforts to dismantle the criminal empires led by men like these, and this has led to some of the most feared figures in the drug world finally being brought to justice. With President Donald Trump back in office, the punishment for these cartel criminals is more severe than it's ever been before.
I will ask Congress to pass legislation ensuring that drug smugglers and human traffickers receive the death penalty.
One by one, these criminals are now discovering that if they mess with the U.S., they'll come to regret it. Who are these notorious cartel leaders, and what did they do to earn the wrath of the United States upon them? Let's dive in to find out. Rafael Caro Quintero. Rafael Caro Quintero, a former co-founder of the infamous Guadalajara cartel, was one of the most wanted drug lords for decades due to his role in numerous heinous crimes, particularly the horrific 1985 murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena.
American drug agent and his pilot were brutally beaten before they were killed.
In 1985, prosecutors say Caro Quintero arranged the kidnapping, torture, and killing of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena.
Agente Camarena.
Dramatized in the Netflix series Narcos.
Camarena was working undercover at the time while he was investigating the cartel's operations. He ended up exposing Caro Quintero's massive drug operation, but would ultimately pay the price with his life. His murder became one of the most significant moments in U.S.-Mexico law enforcement history. Caro Quintero was blamed for orchestrating the crime, which led to a massive outcry and an extensive manhunt. For years, Caro Quintero evaded capture. In 1989, he was arrested and sentenced to 40 years in prison for the murder of Camarena. However, in 2013, in a move that shocked both Mexican and U.S. authorities, he was released from prison on a legal technicality after serving just 28 years. When Americans woke up to the news of his release at the time, outrage spread throughout the nation. This was a man who was considered a key figure in the drug trade and a symbol of Mexico's struggles with corruption, and now he was walking free with no warning from Mexico at all.
60-year-old Rafael Caro Quintero, shown here in 2005, apparently walked out of a Mexican prison a free man in the middle of the night with no cameras present. A court overturned his conviction, saying he was tried in the wrong court back in 1985, federal instead of state, for the murder of U.S. Drug Enforcement agent Enrique Camarena. The release caught U.S. officials by surprise. They heard about it from the Mexican media.
The head of operations for the DEA at the time expressed his fury over the drug lord's release.
How could this drug lord be released from prison without the United States knowing?
We are extremely disappointed, and more than that, we are angry, we are mad. This is personal. Never did we think that this was going to happen.
Known as the godfather of Mexican drug cartels, Caro Quintero is on DEA's most wanted list. The agency says while in prison, he continued to work with the Sinaloa cartel, the largest in Mexico, and launder drug money.
Caro Quintero's release came as a massive betrayal, but the United States would not allow the killer of one of their own go free forever. He remained one of the top priorities for U.S. law enforcement. The U.S. government offered a $20 million reward for information leading to his capture, and his name was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. Finally, in July 2022, Caro Quintero was arrested in the remote mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, after a dramatic operation involving both Mexican and U.S. officials. He was found hiding in a rural area and was captured by Mexican authorities who worked in coordination with the DEA. His arrest was a significant victory for both U.S. and Mexican law enforcement, as it marked the end of a nearly 40-year pursuit.
The Department of Justice says a drug lord behind the killing of a U.S. federal agent was captured by Mexican forces. Rafael Caro Quintero, known as the narco of narcos, helped found the Guadalajara cartel.
The news of Caro Quintero's capture was major news all across the world.
Nowhere left to hide for one of the FBI's most wanted drug lords. Not even the mountains of his native Sinaloa state in Mexico. Rafael Caro Quintero, once the US's primary supplier of heroin, cocaine and marijuana, finally caught.
Unfortunately, though, the effort to take down Caro Quintero was not without some tragic losses.
14 people died in a helicopter crash during the operation. The Navy called it an accident. Caro Quintero, believed to be in his 60s, is being held at a maximum security prison near Mexico City as he awaits his immediate extradition to the US.
That extradition finally took place in February of 2025. While it has been 4 decades since Camarina's murder, Caro Quintero is now back behind bars in the United States, where he will most likely stay for good this time.
40 years later, dozens of DEA agents looked on as Caro Quintero was brought into court in Camarina's handcuffs.
There is no criminal that can escape the reach of the DEA and the rule of law of the United States of America. We stand here united today. We will never forget, and we will fight on.
It was Trump who called for Caro Quintero to be extradited back to the United States to face justice.
The aging drug kingpin was known as the narco of narcos. Federal prosecutors called him one of the most notorious drug lords of the modern era. Caro Quintero was among 29 cartel leaders Mexico handed over to the United States under pressure from the Trump administration, and days before U.S. tariffs are scheduled to go into effect.
Caro Quintero is now facing a multitude of charges, including his involvement in drug trafficking, money laundering, and of course, the murder of Kiki Camarena. Dairo Antonio Úsuga, Otoniel. Dairo Antonio Úsuga, better known by his alias Otoniel, was a name that struck fear into the hearts of many, both in Colombia and the United States. Otoniel was the leader of the Gulf Clan, one of Colombia's most powerful and violent drug cartels.
The group is more commonly known as the Gulf Clan, South America's largest cocaine trafficking organization, and the graffiti warns that they're here.
Its tentacles stretch across the country. It's responsible for land theft, illegal gold mining, corruption, extortion, and murder. Thousands of men are estimated to be under its command.
Otoniel was a master of avoiding law enforcement and trafficking tons of cocaine and other illicit substances across borders. He had a vast empire that expanded not only through Colombia, but also deeply into the United States and beyond. Under his leadership, the Gulf Clan became one of the largest criminal organizations in the world, wreaking havoc and leaving a trail of violence and death in its wake. But while Otoniel had all the money and fame a person could want, he spent every waking hour in fear of being captured. The US and Colombian governments were relentless in their pursuit of him. He was considered one of the most wanted men on the planet, with the US offering a reward of up to $5 million for his arrest.
Of course, the Americans have invested something like $11 billion in their war on drugs, and they want to see a return for that.
But Otoniel's ability to remain hidden, often in remote jungle regions, made him seem almost like a ghost, evading capture for years, despite the efforts of the forces from both countries. The walls finally began to close in on him in 2021. After years of intelligence gathering, Colombian authorities, backed by the US, launched Operation Osiris, a massive, multi-agency effort that was aimed at dismantling the Gulf Clan. Otoniel, who had been living in the thick jungles of Colombia's mountains and hiding from detection, was known for the ruthless tactics he used to stay hidden and in charge. On October 23, 2021, Otoniel was finally tracked down in the dense mountains of the Urabá region in northern Colombia. A combined force of Colombian special forces, military personnel, and law enforcement agents swarmed his location. It was a daring operation that involved helicopters and high-tech surveillance. The capture itself was incredibly intense. It was a highly orchestrated mission that caught Otoniel and his security forces off guard. After a brief firefight, Otoniel was taken into custody. The news of his capture spread swiftly and was considered a major victory in the war against drugs and cartels.
Colombia has seized one of the world's most wanted drug traffickers in a major operation supported by the United States and the United Kingdom. Dairo Antonio Úsuga, known as Otoniel, was found hiding in the jungle near the Colombia-Panama border. Hundreds of Special Forces troops took part in the capture mission. and the arrest is being hailed as the most significant blow to drug trafficking in the country since the death of Pablo Escobar in the 1990s.
Check out the dramatic moment that one of the most wanted men in recent history was led off of a helicopter surrounded by armed guards.
Dairo Antonio Úsuga, better known as Otoniel, had a $5 million bounty placed on his head by the United States. He was seized after a joint operation by the Army, Air Force and police on Saturday. The leader of Colombia's largest criminal gang, the Gulf Clan, Úsuga is accused of trafficking into the US, killing police officers, recruiting minors, and actually abusing children.
The pure evil and depravity of this man was unlike anything that had been seen before, as both Mexico and the United States would agree. This is a man who took innocent lives, destroyed families, and wreaked havoc across multiple nations. His capture, Colombia's president pointed out, was the biggest success in the war against the cartels in decades.
President Ivan Duque hailed the capture as the most important for 30 years.
El máximo cabecilla.
This is the biggest blow against drug trafficking in our country this century. This blow is only comparable to the fall of Pablo Escobar in the 1990s.
Even during this intense moment, when Otoniel was first captured, you can see the lack of remorse and arrogance on his face, a chilling reminder of what an evil man this is. A smirk could be seen on his face as he was taken into custody.
Otoniel was captured in his rural hideout in northwestern Colombia. One police officer was killed in the operation, which included 500 Special Forces troops and 22 helicopters. As the net closed in on him, the US and the UK joined forces with the Colombians to help.
In a press conference after the capture, Colombia's National Police Commander, General Jorge Luis Vargas, explained the careful and strategic way that these forces were able to track Otoniel's whereabouts.
We were clear he was moving with the help of 8 security teams, separated by 1 to 3 kilometers each. We began an important satellite work against him, with agencies from the United States and the United Kingdom, where with each movement, with trace analysts, with communications, more than 50 experts in signal intelligence permanently covering that area.
Úsuga now faces extradition proceedings to the United States.
In May 2022, Otoniel was extradited to the United States, where he faced charges for drug trafficking, money laundering, and countless acts of violence. José Rodolfo Villarreal-Hernández. José Rodolfo Villarreal-Hernández, or El Gato, as he was infamously known in the criminal world, was a figure of pure evil. He was a kingpin in the Beltrán-Leiva cartel, whose ruthless control over drug trafficking and violent acts left a trail of bloodshed across both Mexico and the United States. He was a man who was feared by both his enemies and his allies. El Gato was tied to a shocking range of criminal activity that includes everything from drug smuggling to kidnapping, money laundering, and even the brutal execution of U.S. informants. For years, El Gato operated under the radar. His cartel's powerful influence in Mexico allowed him to evade capture. This was truly an impressive feat, considering the fact that U.S. authorities had placed him on their radar due to his direct involvement in the 2013 murder of a U.S. informant in Texas. This was a crime that had deeply shaken the law enforcement community. The name of the U.S. informant was Juan Jesus Guerrero Chapa, and he was a key player in the fight against the Beltrán-Leiva cartel. In May 2013, El Gato issued a chilling order to kill Guerrero Chapa. The U.S. informant had been living under protection in the United States for a while, but the cartel's reach was powerful, and El Gato's network of assassins was extensive. On the day of Guerrero Chapa's death, he was ambushed outside a restaurant in the upscale area of Monterrey, Mexico. As he sat in his car with his family, a group of cartel hitmen, operating under El Gato's orders, approached him. Without warning, they opened fire, shooting him multiple times. It was a brutal assassination that left Guerrero Chapa dead and the entire community in terror. It also made the pressure to bring this monster into custody all the more intense.
This same group allegedly committed the murder for hire on May 22nd, 2013 at the direction of Villarreal-Hernández. Investigators believe that Villarreal-Hernández had a personal vendetta against the victim.
There is a reward of up to $1 million for information that leads to the arrest of Villarreal-Hernández. The FBI believes he may be hiding in Mexico.
The search for El Gato became one of the highest priorities for both Mexican and U.S. authorities. The FBI included him on their 10 most wanted fugitives list.
A murder suspect in a North Texas case is now among the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. His name is José Rodolfo Villarreal-Hernández, also known as El Gato. He's accused of stalking and orchestrating the murder for hire of Juan Chapa at South Lake Town Square back in May of 2013. The confrontation involved a group of people in masks, and it happened in less than 10 seconds.
The task force, which had been gathering intel on El Gato for over a decade, finally closed in on him. This involved a complicated series of tactical raids that led to his discovery. Despite his efforts to stay hidden and keep moving, his network of safe houses and contacts was slowly unraveling. In January 2023, El Gato was finally captured. Authorities surrounded his compound in a swift, calculated raid, taking him into custody without any major resistance.
Tonight we've learned of a surprise extradition from Mexico. Nearly 30 convicts with ties to the cartels are in U.S. custody right now, and one of them is suspected in a high-profile killing at South Lake Town Square. Let's bring in Matt Howerton. Matt, when someone is gunned down by hitmen at a luxury outdoor mall, it still reverberates even 10 years later.
Yeah, it's hard to forget, Chris, and the DOJ says the man who planned it all, José Rodolfo Villarreal-Hernández, nicknamed El Gato, is a known leader of the Beltran Leyva drug cartel.
For the United States, the capture of El Gato was considered a moment of justice, long overdue. The extradition process began shortly after, and in February 2025, El Gato was finally delivered into U.S. custody. El Gato now faces a series of charges related to his involvement in the drug trade, violent crimes, and his role in the murder of the informant. For law enforcement, the arrest of El Gato was a long-awaited and hard-earned victory. The fall of El Gato marked the end of an era for his cartel and an important step in the fight for justice. Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Ismael El Mayo Zambada was once a mastermind of the Sinaloa cartel, but also a figure so well hidden that he managed to slip through the fingers of both Mexican and U.S. authorities for decades. His criminal empire spanned continents, controlling the flow of drugs worth billions of dollars. His reputation was one of power, strategic brilliance, and silence. While his rise to power came alongside the infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the styles of these two men are completely the opposite. El Chapo was very brazen, but El Mayo was content to let others be the public face of their criminal empire. He stayed out of sight, avoiding media attention and public scandals, always careful to keep his operations under the radar. His ability to remain invisible became his greatest strength. For years, there was a sense that El Mayo's capture was an impossible task. Authorities in both Mexico and the U.S. tried again and again to catch him, but El Mayo always seemed to be one step ahead, making sure he stayed untouchable. But in July of 2024, Ismael El Mayo Zambada was finally captured by U.S. authorities. The operation, which had been carefully orchestrated by the DEA, FBI, and Mexican law enforcement, relied on years of careful intelligence gathering and undercover work. In a shocking twist, Guzman Lopez invited El Mayo to join him on a private plane that he believed would be taking him to a meeting at a ranch in Mexico. However, in reality, it ended up flying to Texas, where both Guzman Lopez and El Mayo were arrested.
New 10 U.S. authorities have arrested two of the top leaders of Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, Ismael Zambada Garcia and Joaquin Guzman, were taken into custody today by the DEA in El Paso, Texas. The Justice Department believes the Sinaloa cartel, along with several other organizations, are responsible for trafficking fentanyl.
El Mayo was extradited to the United States, where he faces numerous charges related to drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime. His arrest marked the end of an era for the Sinaloa cartel. While the cartel still operates, the loss of his leadership has definitely impacted their network. His capture was seen as an incredible triumph for U.S. and Mexican law enforcement. As the cartel's once invincible kings fall, one by one, the message is clear: there is no refuge from the reach of justice. With their leadership shattered, the Sinaloa cartel, though still active, has been dealt a blow that will take years to recover from. But the war is far from over. As we've seen, law enforcement continues to push forward with relentless determination, and the U.S. government, under President Trump's administration, remains committed to ensuring that those who have terrorized both sides of the border will face the consequences of their actions. So what do you think about all of this? Who might be the next cartel leader to face ultimate payback? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.